Okay, so as always, I'm tired tonight, but I am excited for the live. So I guess we can just talk. I don't care.
Yeah. I mean, we're getting started. I mean, I know right now the little counter thing says nobody is here yet.
I know. Well, Mickey texted me. I know for sure Mickey and Jared have our back. So they're going to be here because she's like, I'm excited for this. So, yeah, one person's there. Hi. So we'll
Hello.
hello, hola, ¿cómo estás? See, Mickey just has our back. Like, I love Mickey and Jared and I love everybody. Yeah, I guess, John, I'm a hot mess today. So why don't you start it and I'll chime in.
Okay. To remind everybody, I'm John Ivy. This is Kim Bozeman.
Hi, I'm Kim.
And we're doing our series of live streams on why they don't want you to vote. And this week we're tackling more of what's on the ballot, the propositions.
Yeah.
But first, we want to do our kind of weekly reminder of where we're at and what's going on. Is that there's an election coming up. Go to vote.ca.gov to you can still register people to vote online. You can go on there. You can see where your ballot's at, whether or not it's been sent to you. If you've already voted and sent it back in, you can check right now to see if it has been accepted and is ready to be counted. Big news. Yeah, very important. About 1.5 million people in California have already cast their ballots, which is very exciting. That's like 10 times as many people at this point in the election as 4 years ago. And so, especially if that's looking the same in other states, that this is going to be a very good election as far as turnout goes and stuff like that. But out of that 1.5 million, already 30,000 of those people, so about 2%. 2% might not seem like a big number, but 30,000 seems like a big number, have had their ballots rejected for one reason or another. Maybe they forgot to sign it. Maybe they didn't seal it. Maybe there wasn't a ballot inside, something like that. 30,000 have had problems. Hopefully that means they did it so early that they'll be able to get notice that their ballot hasn't been accepted and get a chance to fix that. If your ballot doesn't get accepted for any reason, you get sent another one. You can go and sign a statement saying, oh, I forgot to sign, here's my signature. There's lots of ways to fix that. So definitely after you vote, check to make sure that it's been accepted. And if for any reason it hasn't, you still can get to vote. The Supreme Court in the last few days decided that the census is now, that they are cutting off any extended census work, and the deadline to fill out the census is either today or tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
It is now. So if you know anybody who hasn't filled out the census yet, just send them to 2020census.gov. This doesn't hurt to remind people, because literally everybody has to fill out the census. There isn't anybody that doesn't. Some people, they don't vote. Everybody needs to fill out the census. And so again, October 5th, the ballots went out. November 3rd is the last day to get the ballots in. And you can postmark them by November 3rd, and they'll be counted as long as they get there within the next 2 weeks after the election. So we'll still be counting ballots late into late November. But getting in early is good. I know tonight we're going to be talking about what's on the ballot. So you can go to votersedge.org, put in your address, and they'll give you everything that's on the ballot and explanations about the different people. They'll tell you how much money that they've raised and where they raised it from. Lots of information on Voters Edge. And Kim, did they have all the stuff from like the Measure X?
Yes. Yeah. You have the information. Oh my gosh, it's so bad.
Oh.
Does Voter Edge explain Measure X?
Yeah.
Not really good. Actually, actually, I had to pull, someone in the group actually asked me about Measure X, so I was able to pull a better explanation from the San Joaquin County, I believe, website that explains a Measure X and how it applies I'm sorry, let me be specific. The cannabis tax. So there is an explanation in the group. And if people still have questions, we can talk about it tonight. But I thought that they didn't do a good job on that, on Voter's Edge.
Yeah, and so that's a problem with a lot of sources, is that sometimes the things are just so local that these national or statewide groups like Voter's Edge just don't do a good job at capturing that. And so the local sources are people you know in your community that care about these things, and the official San Joaquin County elections will have information about things like Measure X. And so today, or this week and next week, we're going to be talking about propositions and measures on the ballot. To recap, we've already done city council members and school board trustees, state assembly and state senate, U.S. House of Representatives, and the president. We've talked a lot about the people on the ballot, and this is now where we're going to talk about the proposed laws on the ballot.
And John, before we get started, I just want to digress 1 minute. And for my people in Lodi, I just want to remind you guys that I did make a post about this, but for those of you all who may be watching that may not be connected with me, I want to tell you that in Lodi, we have a voting service centers that will be open for 3 days prior to the election, starting on October 31st. And those locations are going to be the Woodlake Pizza, the Lodi Grape Festival, Hutchins Street Square, and One Lodi. And what you can do at the voting service center is you can register to vote, you can receive a replacement ballot, and you can vote in the little privacy booth. Right now, there are also Dropbox locations open in Lodi. And this is where you won't receive any assistance, but you can go in and drop off your ballot to any of these locations. And that's going to be Robinson's Feed and Fuel over on Victor Road, Van Ruten Family Winery, Da Vinci's Catering, and Lodi City Hall. One other thing, the day of the election, November 3rd, Lodi City Hall will transform into what we call drive-up democracy. So for those of you all who are worried about getting in contact or may not be as mobile, you can drive up only on the day of the election and turn in your ballot. This information is posted on my my actual personal page, and I will continue to get it out there, but I just want to let you guys know that, that those are the authorized places that can collect your ballot in Lodi.
Yeah, and that's true. Throughout California, there's going to be drop boxes, vote centers, polling places, and the elections offices, and a lot of the counties are doing the drive-up democracy, drive-through democracy in some places. And so wherever you are, you can find that information. A good place to start is Google, like where's my polling place, or where can I vote? You can go to your county elections website. You can go to vote.ca.gov and look for polling places and vote centers, and the maps will come up, and there's usually something close by.
Yes. All right. So before we get started in the propositions and measures, does anyone have any questions about anything that we've went over before? As you guys know, it's interactive. We're here for you. So John and myself keep an eye on the chat. But before we get into the nitty gritty, if there's something that you wanted us to address, let us know. And so I'm going to say, I don't think so, but I'll keep watching. John, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to let you go back first.
Okay, so we wanted to start before we dove into the propositions, just kind of going over like what is a proposition, what's a measure, what's a bond. And so propositions. Right now we've got a dozen propositions on the ballot statewide, and a proposition is just a proposed law. Basically, it's an idea, and if enough people vote yes on it, then that idea will become law. And so propositions end up on the ballot in one of three ways, really. First is that anybody who has such an idea can register to start a petition. And if they collect enough signatures, then it goes on the ballot in the next election. And there's a timing kind of thing. In other words, you only have that time before the next election to collect those signatures. And so you have to, for most of the propositions, you have to collect around 600,000 signatures statewide in California, and then it'll go on the ballot. The other way a proposition gets on the ballot is if the state legislature puts it on the ballot. This is the case if they want to amend the Constitution, if they want to raise taxes, if they want to borrow money, they have to go through this process of asking our permission. And so that becomes a proposition on the ballot. The third way is the state legislature passes a law. The governor signs it, it's ready to go into effect, and then anybody can register to collect signatures and collect enough signatures to stop that law from going into effect. That's what we call a referendum. And so Prop 25, this election is an example of a referendum where the legislature passed the law, the governor signed it, and then they gathered enough signatures to stop it. And Jared asks, is it always the same number of required signatures? No. First, there's different thresholds depending on what you're doing. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head. You can recall somebody with a certain number of signatures to put your petition on the ballot. Right now it's 600,000 unless you're trying to amend the Constitution. And then that number is closer to 1 million signatures. And that is actually based on how many people voted in the last gubernatorial election. So the last time the governor ran for office, how many people voted in that election, and then it's a percent of that. I think it's 5%. I could be wrong. I'll have to look back, but I think it's 5% of the people who voted in the last election. So if anybody remembers, in 2016, we had a ton of propositions on the ballot. There were like 20 of them. It was crazy. There were a lot of propositions. And one of the reasons for that is that in 2014, the last time we had a governor on the ballot, turnout was really, really low. And so turnout was really, really bad in 2014. That means in 2016, you didn't have to collect as many signatures. Now this time, 2018 was a pretty good turnout. So the number of signatures you have to collect is 600,000. For the most part, it costs money to collect signatures. Like nobody does it voluntarily. Like nobody comes up with an idea and gets out there with their friends. You have to pay the millions and millions of dollars for the signature collectors to go out and collect signatures.
Yeah, and like one thing I wanted to add is a lot of people might be familiar currently right now. People are trying to recall Gavin Newsom, and so I just did a quick check. The requirement to call him is 1.5 million signatures, and right now, according to the last news article, which was on the 21st of August, they only had 250,000 signatures to recall Gavin Newsom. So it is definitely a labor, like John is saying, very labor intensive undertaking here, and it's not always successful. I want to say, I can't remember, John, the name of the last governor that we had recalled in California.
That was Gray Davis.
Yes, Gray Davis was the last. Yes, so it's anyway. I just wanted to give you guys that little factoid that where we are, because I know I've seen a lot of people that I'm actually connected with on social media asking to sign the petition. So I just wanted to. I thought that was interesting.
And that's a good example of like where something might seem like everybody knows about this, everybody's on board with this, everybody in America agrees with me. And then you look at the numbers and you go, well, there's 40 million people in California and only 250,000 of them have signed this petition. So even if there's a large group of people, is that everybody? Have we talked to everybody? Are we like, are we insulated in our community and the people that we know and these politics that we're interested in? So I always take the opportunity to talk to people in random places and ask them, like, what's going on in your political world? What's the exciting news? Because we do get different news and we do get different things.
And I think in addition of that, John, I think it's important for us to understand like the area and how the politics and the partisan get involved in the area, right? Central Valley, you know, a lot of farming, ag industry, right? It tends to be a little bit more conservative, right? And so if you are someone that has a different ideology, political ideology, you may feel like you're surrounded by people who you're like, what's going on here? But like John is saying, when you look at it collectively, if you look at California, right, we all know California tends to be a very blue state, right? But we are siloed in a very conservative kind of area. So that's always something to keep in mind and understand when you're trying to analyze trends and politics and you're looking at the news. Unfortunately, the news is complicit on both sides of kind of feeding whatever narrative that serves them. So I wanted to kind of go back, and John, you said something really important, and I just want to hone in on the fact that when we talk about these propositions, right, and we talk about this series of why they don't want you to vote, right, remember that our elected officials, our legislators, have to ask the citizens permission to execute in decisions, right? And so that is another huge reason why we need to be showing up at the ballot, right? And earlier in the conversation, we talked about how we're showing up in these record numbers, but we need to keep that momentum going because these elected officials work for us. And so whether it's a presidential election or it's not, they're coming to the citizens asking for permissions to make decisions that impact us every day. And so that's why it's really important for us to be understanding what a proposition is, how it works, and what the impact is to not only us individually, but for our community. And I think that that's one thing I wanted to emphasize is that when you cast your ballot, right, it is my recommendation that you take into consideration your community and those who may be not as advantaged as you, right? Like those decisions are impacting collectively the community. And so if you're someone that takes voting responsibly, right, and you show up to the ballot all the time, you're actually, you're speaking for thousands, right? Because we know based on the statistics that John provided that such a small percentage of people are showing up. So it's just really important to remember they work for us. They work for us.
Yeah, definitely. Like propositions are an interesting part of California history. It's a chance for us to directly vote on the laws and directly vote on the things that our government is doing. So that's pretty much propositions. And then we want to talk about measures. Measures are just like propositions, except for instead of being for the whole state, they are just for one particular city or county. Just like propositions, they can get on the ballot through initiative, meaning that you petition and you gather signatures. The number of signatures that are required is smaller. Obviously, it's based on that city's population or that county's population. So the threshold is smaller. You can get a ballot initiative that will set the laws, basically being able to make decisions just like a city council would or the board of supervisors would. So you can't affect things statewide. You can't change a statewide law, but you can affect things in your city or county. Most measures that get on the ballot come from the city council or the board of supervisors themselves. Again, doing that, having to ask for permission thing. And the things that they have to ask permission for is if they want to raise taxes, they have to ask permission. If they want to borrow money, they have to ask permission. If they want to change something about how the local government is run, they have to ask permission. And it's really those three things that'll be on the ballot every election. And this time in San Joaquin County, there's a Measure X, which is a tax on marijuana sales. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a cannabis tax. They are saying that the tax will be used to go to fund education in sports, and so I don't know, John. Were we going to talk about Measure X tonight?
We can talk about it later. I just wanted to bring up as an example that's an example of what you can find on the ballot, and it works the same way as the propositions. Enough people vote yes, it becomes the law, or that tax passes.
Yeah. And
I don't think they need permission to end a tax. So that's something to keep in mind, is that they can always stop taxing you, but to add a tax, they got to ask the permission. Which is why you would end up with something like Measure X, which just taxes a small subset of the population, or a smaller subset than the whole, is because it's easier to pass a tax like that. If you can convince people who aren't affected by it to vote yes, that's an easier thing. And so I also wanted to touch really quickly on our statewide bond propositions. And so bonds is a word that you'll hear a lot. Proposition 14 on the ballot this year is a bond proposition. So bonds are just the way that the government borrows money. They quote unquote sell a bond to someone, and then that bond holder is owed interest payments and the money that they paid back. So it's really just a loan. It's a loan that the government takes out by asking basically anybody, can I borrow money from you, and we'll pay you back over the next 30 years. Individuals can buy bonds from cities and counties and the state, and even the United States sells treasury bonds. So you can enter the bond market for as low as like $25. But for the most part, it's usually big banks, big retirement funds, big institutional investors are usually the ones loaning money to the government. And specifically the bond proposition, to touch on 14 just a little bit, what it will do if enough people vote yes is it will just authorize the government to borrow the money. It doesn't automatically make them borrow the money. The process of borrowing after that is a budget process. It's later decision making. This is just the first step. It's kind of like giving the government a credit limit and saying, hey, you can borrow for these purposes, but please borrow responsibly. Currently, the state owes about $80 billion in its bond debt. And that's out of $118 billion that it's authorized to borrow. So it has another $38 billion right now that it just hasn't borrowed, even though the voters said, you guys can borrow another $38 billion. It just hasn't done it. Prop 14 would borrow another $5.5 billion, or authorize another $5.5 billion. And that would be to stem cell research and the development of new medical treatments in California. If the government borrows the whole $5.5 billion, then it will cost about $300 million a year to make those interest and principal payments for the next 30 years. And you can see from that graph, the little black line is the part that makes up Prop 14. Just on top of that gray box, which is the authorized but not yet borrowed money. And so just a quick, that's how bonds work. Jared has a question about bond measures. Are there ever bond measures that go through that the state doesn't cash in on? Yes and no. It might be that they don't end up doing it all right away. But if you can see from the chart, they have about $38 billion that they either haven't borrowed yet, or that they won't be borrowing. But on the other hand, there's $80 billion that they still have outstanding, and so I don't want to say that they won't borrow the money, but it really does come down to budget decisions later about when they will borrow the money, if they can afford to finance it at that time. And so if you vote yes, you should be rest assured that it will probably add to the debt load. But as you can see, it's not a straight up curve. In other words, California just hasn't continuously borrowed, even though that chart goes back to 95. So that's a chart that looks through the last recession. And as you can see, there's a small spike during the recession. It's not a mountain that just kept climbing. So we've been pretty good about fiscal responsibility in California as far as our borrowing. And yes, Mickey, there are expiration dates. So I don't know on Prop 14 how that's set up, but everything's kind of laid out into usually when these bonds go up into 5 or 10 year increments. And usually there's a sunset on when the state can no longer borrow it.
So I can tell you, John, so Prop 14 is 30 years that they have for the stem cell research. They have to repay it at $260 million over the next 30 years. But I wanted to go back and I wanted to ask you a question, because as I'm thinking, this is something that I honestly don't know the answer to. So if you have $30 billion that has been unallocated, why do they have to, if we're making the comparison to a credit card, right? And so they still have $30 billion that they can use. Why do we have to pass another bond? Why can't we just have them tap into the money? I think I know the answer to this, but I'm not really 100% sure. So I thought if I had the question, maybe someone else.
It has to do with what they're authorized to do specifically with those bond authorities. In other words, right now we're voting on Prop 14, which authorizes the $5.5 billion, but it's not just a blanket $5.5 billion. It's $5.5 billion that goes to stem cell research and the development of new medical treatments. And so yes, it's kind of adding to the top of their credit limit, but it's a very specific thing. And so that's what that $38 billion is made up of too, is very specific programs. And so if they already had $5.5 billion for stem cell research and development of new medical treatments in there, then they probably would just use that and not ask for more at this time to be authorized. It's probably because that isn't one of the programs that's already authorized for that other stack of money.
Okay, so I think that's good. I want to do a check-in though with the audience, because it's really good stuff, right? And so do you guys have any questions about the bonds? I know that a lot of you had received your ballot. Some of you guys have already turned in your ballot. Yay for democracy. So I think, John does a great job of explaining, but I always like to come in and ask him all of the what ifs here. And so I think that that's really interesting. So John, another thing I'm going to pose to you, and I'm also looking at the chat in case anyone has any questions. Okay, Jared has a good question. Is it always legislators that author bond measures?
I wanted to say yes, but I don't think it is always legislators, because this isn't just, bonds aren't just authorized for like the state to specifically borrow the money and sell it. It can authorize local governments to do it. It can authorize agencies. And in a lot of ways, that money is going to something. So it might be going to an industry that's going to benefit from this borrowing. And so if they want to get it done, I think that they could get something like that passed. And I want to cite specific examples because I think this has happened before. But in general, it's going to be the legislature putting the bond measures on. And because they have to ask for permission to sell bonds and to borrow money, this is something that you're going to see every election.
No question. Oh, hey, Sarah. That's my boo thing.
Oh wait, and
Okay.
here's a good example. I knew I'd find an example real quick. Prop 14 actually wasn't put on the ballot by the legislature. It was put on the ballot by initiative, and you can tell that. Let me just pull up real quick. Hopefully I hit the right tab. Oh, I did. Is that you can pull it up. And the title of Prop 14 is that it authorizes bonds, continuing stem cell research, initiative statute. This means somebody, and we could look up who, it's probably whichever industry does stem cell research. They paid to circulate this and collect signatures, and that's why it's on the ballot. Is the legislature did not put this on there, somebody did. And so each of the propositions, you can see their title. This is what will show up on the ballot along with the summary. And this will tell you, you can see it in the title, initiative statute means that it was put on the ballot by petition signatures. Initiative constitutional amendment means that it was put on the ballot by a lot of signatures. And then we have a legislative constitutional amendment in Prop 16, which means that the legislature put it on the ballot. And that says it. So what I'm pulling up here is the quick reference guide in your official voter information guide.
So, yep. No, keep going. Abe chimed in and said, which is exactly what John is mentioning. Yeah, so I'm just following along. I'm nodding my head. Like I said, I'm making sure I do know a lot of these things. But I think the one thing that I wanted to say again is that democracy in action, right? Like we think that we don't have power, but we do. Right. And so even me, I don't want to get into details right now. I actually started collecting signatures because I wanted to have something changed, but it was we'll talk about it another day, but it was too much work to to have that undertaking. But, we all have power is I think what I want to just say. We all have power. And so Mickey had said, it's in the wording. Yeah. But the thing is that if you don't know, what the wording means, right, you don't understand. And so now that you know, Mickey, you're responsible to educate someone else. And the thing that's hard is that who's looking out for us, right? Like, again, one of the reasons why John and I started this is because we see problems on both sides. We see dishonesty on both sides. But who is just really presenting the facts to the average citizen and wanting them to be empowered and wanting and advocating for the betterment of their lives? I would say it's a minority of people, right? You have special interest groups, like Abe was saying, flooding, lobbying, trying to advance their interests and their profits. And then you have, the right wanting to advance, their ideology and what benefits them, and the left too. Both parties, I'm just going to say it, are bought by Wall Street, right? And so we, right, as citizens, have to make sure that we're educating ourselves and we understand how the infrastructure works, because we can make change. But if we stay home and we stay uninformed, we stay stuck in the same BS. I'm trying to stop with my potty mouth because I have such a potty mouth. So I'm going to keep it going. But great discussion. I learned a couple of things because, like I said, I didn't understand fully. I think I did, but why they have to kind of keep asking for it. So those are the things that you should take into consideration, right? When you are watching the news or you're reading, understand the history, understand like how much money they have left, how they're balancing and managing our budget that we currently have, right? I'll get off my soapbox, but y'all know I'm surfing on the soapbox all the time. I'm surfing. I'm just going to get a little surf box that's going to float around here. Keep going, John.
Okay, well, so that was pretty much it, as much as we wanted to talk about state bond debt and stuff. And I know it, like every time I get to talk about it, it's very interesting to me to learn more about the bonds. But we wanted to try and get to some of the propositions today, starting with Proposition 15, which, as I have on the screen, Proposition 15 is titled as "Increases funding sources for public schools, community colleges, and local government services by changing tax assessment of commercial and industrial property, initiative constitutional amendment."
So, okay. So this is going to be hard, but we're going to try to do. I personally am going to try to do really well about staying nonpartisan, not telling people how to vote. But John, I think we missed one huge part of it. Let's talk about advertisement. Let's talk about like the money that goes into these ads and the deception that happens to a person that isn't educated. So, you know, I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to lead this conversation. Then I'm going to ask John to jump in. And before we talk about Prop 15, I went to my mailbox today, right? And I had probably about 25 different ads for vote no on Prop 15. And vote no, it makes it harder for people in California to own a home. That is literally what it said, right? And I'm just going to say this very boldly. Advertisements, please do not make your decision based on a commercial. Please, because they are liars. There is no ethical code that makes them tell the truth on an advertisement. So when this is my example, y'all. I am telling you, I was watching TV and I believe it was Prop 20. Yes, the Uber and Lyft. Oh my God, they had the
Prop 22.
They had the young black guy, and he's like, I am able to take care of my grandma, and being an independent contractor is flexible. And woo, child, y'all, I'm telling you, he had me feeling some kind of way. And then you have this old lady. They are deceptive as F, right? And and the rent control one with the sweet old lady, that's the other one. She had me just feeling some kind of way. I had to go back and do my research. So I kind of want to. So John and I were talking about this on Saturday, and so I had read the article. John had already gave me this. I want to ask you guys a question. Okay. Let's talk about, and we're talking about ads specifically, okay? So we're going to talk about this prop a little bit later, but I believe it is prop, what's the Uber driver?
22.
22. I always get 21 and 22 convinced. 21 is rent control. 22 is the Uber and Lyft. Okay. Quiz right now. How much money, okay, do you guys think that Uber and Lyft spent on advertisement so they could get out of making their employees like full employees? I just want you guys to guess how much money that they have spent in California alone on this damn proposition. So y'all help me out some more. So Day is laughing at me, but I'm serious. How much do you guys think? Yeah, that sweet old lady, she gets me every damn time, and I know what I'm voting for, but I can't watch it. Okay, so Jared says 100 million between two, I think. Millions. More, Jared. More, Sarah. More than 100 million. Some more guesses, y'all. Y'all just, woof, child. I'm just telling you. It's disgusting. Day said, oh, wait, so Abe said his guess was originally only 20 million. Oh, Abe, you got to step it up. So Day is the closest, y'all. But it's still more. Okay, so my ad that I read was 185.
Oh,
185.
I pulled up an old ad.
Yes, 185. So I'm gonna try to find that, and if I find it while we keep going. So the moral of the story is, I just say it. You have lobbyists and big corporations, greedy ass corporations investing millions of to advocate against policies and legislation that is going to help the average citizen. So you guys, exactly, Jared, that's what I mean. I knew a lot of money I knew about advertisements and all of that. I had no idea how much Lyft and Uber alone had spent on this, and it's despicable. So I guess I'm kind of telling you guys how I'm gonna vote, right? But it's just like, come on, you spent all this damn money to fight against giving your employees protections that are like, it's our law, right? Like, you don't get to like scapegoat the policy, right? You know, because you have money to buy ads, right? Like, it's disgusting. Yeah, exactly, Abe. $185 billion. I'm so mad. Oh, look, it's up. Oh my God. Like, because it's going up because they're continuing pouring money into to not do the right thing. And you're going to find that I'm honing in on Uber and Lyft, but they are not the only. Exactly, Mickey. It's gross. It's disgusting. They are not the only guilty corporates. It's what happens when you have big corporations doing whatever they can to protect their interests and their wealth and not thinking about the little person. It's sad. It's heartbreaking. But what is even more sad is that we don't know these things, right? The news, they're not telling us these things, right? There's no one really explaining this to the average citizen about this. And so you will watch the news and you'll see these commercials, right? And the ethos, they appeal to you and you're like, oh my God, I just got to make sure. I mean, I'm telling you, that guy telling me that he could take care of his grandma, I knew it was bullshit, but he almost had me. He had me confused, right, Jared? Jared, I just want you to know, I wanted to talk about Citizens United, but John, like, he pulled me back. So we're not going to talk about it tonight, but we're going to talk about it one day. So that's kind of the one thing I wanted to just, before we really got into Prop 15, I wanted to kind of go back and talk about advertisements, because right now, that's what you're getting flooded with, right? In your mailbox, on your TV. And a lot of people make decisions solely off of that, right? And if you think about one of the things that John and I talked about, and I'll let you know, I'm going to stop, is that you kind of need to understand in your voter access guide, there is a very good analysis of the proposition. And then you can also see what types of groups are supporting each proposition. And that kind of gives you a hint of maybe what is, what's on the up and up. But one of the things I want to say is there's a misconception that just because your union supports a proposition, that is always going to be in your best interest. And I'm going to say that's false, right? Unions have their own interests as well. There's a lot of money involved in unions. I am a member of a union. I am pro-union, but do not just be swayed because your union is supporting you. I have been receiving, I'm supporting a proposition. I've been receiving a lot of text messages. Hey, this is such and such from, this particular union. Can you stand with us on this proposition? And it's like, once you start asking them questions, so make sure you educate yourself. I'm going to stop right there and get back to Prop 15. We had to talk about the lies. I'm telling y'all, when y'all see that old lady, you just say, Grandma, why is you lying? And do not be swayed. Do not be swayed. Okay.
Yeah, and talking about doing your own research, I know that's kind of a conservative talking point right now. Do your own research. Don't trust the government or the media. But don't also just trust the random video that you see on Facebook or that advertisement or something like that. There are official sources of information that are nonpartisan that will give you the explanation. And right now, they still are kind of behind on the times. And so what I have up on the screen is the voter guide pages for Prop 15, which explain everything about Prop 15. But it's a lot of writing. It's a lot of stuff that's kind of not accessible to everyone. And it would be great to have all of this in video format in a way that we can talk. So that's one of the reasons why we're doing this, is so that we can talk it out with everybody and not be, and you know that nobody's paying us, because nobody would pay us to to try and convince you of something. But so Prop 15 is about property taxes, and it's about funding things. But that's kind of how you always frame a property tax, is that you talk about the things that it's going to fund, and the people who are against it concentrate on the people that are going to have to pay it. And so those are the two sides of the coin. In this case, we're talking about kind of a limit on property taxes that was put in the 70s with something you've probably heard referred to as Prop 13. Anytime anybody says Prop 13, that's the Prop 13 they're talking about, which is when we decided that property taxes were going to be capped. And so property taxes, if you don't know, are based on the value of your property. So you own a home, and let's say the property tax rate is 2%. And that's the usual rate in California. Anywhere you go is probably going to be around 2%. And so if your home is worth $400,000, or a simpler number, let's say your home is worth $100,000. You have a very tiny home somewhere in California. You can buy it for $100,000. That means every year you're going to owe $2,000 in property tax. What Prop 13 did in the 70s was it said, oh, that's fine, but if my property value ever goes up, you're not going to increase my taxes. And so you're always going to pay that 2% on that original value. And so if you own your home for 30 years, you bought it for $100,000, they can move that rate up a little bit, but you're never going to pay more than a 2% increase each year. So after 30 years, even if your home's worth $1 million now, you're still paying taxes on it as if it's worth $100,000. And so just to give you the background, that's the property tax thing, is that we treat properties as if they haven't increased in value.
Which I'm going to add here, we know that they increase in value, right? And so we know that, let me see how to say this, that there is still, especially properties in California, right? Let's talk about the worth. And so, and if we're looking at where this money is going, right, to our K-12 schools, and community colleges and local government, I'm not telling people how to vote, right? I'm just telling you to think about that, right? As we gain wealth, right, we should, it's my personal opinion that we should pay more, right? And so if my home is worth more, I should pay the taxes based on what it is worth, not based on some bull crap legislation that passed a long time ago. So I'm not saying how to vote for this prop, but
I'm totally on board with Kim on that. And I want to say that this proposition doesn't undo that previous one for most people, or for all people. And so this is one of those Citizens United things, is that Prop 13 that limits your tax increases includes corporations. And so a corporation, for as long as it lives, which is forever, never has to pay taxes on its property except for whatever the value was when it first bought it, let's say 50 years ago. So it's paying taxes based on the value from 50 years ago and not paying taxes on the value of its property that it has today. And some of these corporations own hundreds of millions of dollars worth of property. And so what Prop 15 would do is basically close the loophole for them. So this would, in effect, basically anybody listening to this, anybody that those people know, or probably anybody that those people have seen in their lifetimes. This is something that would greatly affect just the ultra wealthy corporate landowners.
So when you see that commercial, because it's an ad that it's in my box right now.
Grandma,
with grandma saying that Prop 15 prevents her from owning a home. Grandma is freaking lying. She's lying. I'm just going to leave it at that. And we're going to move on because we have 2 more props to talk about. So I'm just saying the lies. Don't believe the lies and the nonsense and the foolery.
Yeah, so I hope we covered that okay on the summary. Is just that it will take away that carve out for large business owners of land. Not small businesses, they still keep their exception, but large businesses owning more than $3 million in property.
Right.
And grandmas.
Yes, exactly.
Grandmas that own more than $50 million in property are going to be having a very sad time.
Right? Yes. So I'm telling you, damn it, Grandma. They're good. They're so good. So I'm sorry, John, was there anything else about this prop you wanted to cover?
No, that was it.
Okay, let's, which one we have next?
Next we had, I've lost my ability to change screens, so let me do that. I think we had Prop 20.
Yes. So I'm hoping, y'all, this one is going to be an easy one here. John, I'm blind, so I'm going to let you, I'll just read it now. So it says, restricts parole for certain offenses currently considered to be nonviolent. Authorizes felony sentences for certain offenses currently treated as only misdemeanors. Initiative statute. So here's the deal. John can talk more about like the wording of it. I want to talk to you about crime and the way that it disproportionately impacts one specific group, a demographic of group Black and brown people. And when I want to talk to you about, which I don't actually have the statistics, I'll ask my amazing partner one day to help me get those statistics. We're talking about like the amount of people that are in jail for like non-violent, non-horrific crimes, right? And the fact that this is essentially a way to strip a poll tax, essentially to strip people away their right to vote, right? And so I'm gonna stop there because y'all know I be surfing on the soapbox really seriously. And so I just want you to think about that. When we're thinking about who is impacted by these laws and legislation and who is being prevented from voting. And I'm gonna stop there. Just think about those things as you're reading the language of this proposition. And I'll let John take it from here.
Yeah, well, and it's hard to talk about Prop 20 in a quote unquote non-partisan way. It is, as we can see, an initiative statute, which means somebody gathered enough signatures to put on the ballot something that would increase sentencing for certain offenses that right now are just misdemeanors. This would make them felonies. It increases, it limits the access to parole programs for people in prison who are meet the program requirements. In other words, that these are programs that you have to apply for and have good behavior for and be on the path to rehabilitation for. This basically just says, you group of people, you're not allowed. And the reason why I want to talk about it a little bit about this is an initiative statute, again, is somebody spent a lot of money to get this on the ballot. They spent millions and millions of dollars. They paid the signature gatherers $6 a signature to get this on the ballot. And what do they have in it for them is an increased prison population.
And we all know, I'm sorry, John.
Yeah.
We all know that prison is big business. It's big money, big profits to keep people in prison. So, you know what I mean? I'm going to stop. I am definitely not nonpartisan on this proposition. It's disgusting. It's bullshit. And I'm voting no. Like, and I hope you guys vote no too. Like, I'm just putting it out there. It's horrific. If you look at how much money is being made on keeping people in prison. And if you look at the disproportionate way that Black and brown people are sentenced, and how the sentencing recommendations are not consistent and more severe, it is, anyway, I'm gonna keep John.
Yeah, if you're a libertarian leaning Republican out there listening to us, you might wonder, like, what's with this Big Brother stuff too? They want to start a DNA database and fill it full of everybody who's ever been arrested or in prison, and so there's just a lot not to like here. And we use the word nonpartisan in a funny way when we're talking about propositions, is because the word nonpartisan comes from non-party. Like, we're not picking a party. Like, we're not with the Democrats, we're not with the Republicans, we're the nonpartisan people. And it might not, and it's a word that we've expanded to mean somebody who doesn't have an opinion on things. But reality kind of has its own bias. And when you look at something like this, you go, this is what it does. I'm not saying that if you think we need a bigger prison population, I'm not telling you that you're wrong. I'm telling you that this bill will do that for you. If you don't want a bigger prison population, I'm not telling you that you're right, but voting no on this is what you would want to do. And so that's the information that we want to give, is not trying to convince you one way or the other, but sometimes it's kind of an obvious choice, depending on who you're talking to. Some people might be like, hey, we need to crack down. We need to get those super predators and stuff.
Law and order. Some people.
And this is your proposition. So I'm not going to try and convince you as to why you're wrong about that, aside from to say that there's no evidence to suggest that increasing the prison population lowers crime rates, that actually attacking these parole programs could have a negative effect on that prison population, who will eventually be returned to society. So even if you're holding them longer, you're just delaying their reentry. And so these programs help to rehabilitate, help to put people on a path forward. I can tell you all of these things, not to try and convince you of something, but just to try and explain, the lay of the land. So that's Prop 20.
Yeah, and so one thing I wanted to add is I want to go back to our conversation about defunding the police, right? And we talked about how do we reduce crime in the community, and we talked about that there's statistical evidence over and over again that says is how we reduce crime, right, is by investing in socioeconomic programs for the enrichment of people's lives, right? It's not by keeping people in jail. So the sentiment and the thought process that keeping people in jail reduces crime rate is just false, right? It's just not factual. And so John said it's so much more nicer than I did, but I just want to kind of remind you of those that have been with us for the series of these lives, is that's what we kind of talked about when we look about where we're getting funding, right? We're spending, I'm going to just tie this together, $25.4 million investing into the Lodi PD, but then we're saying we want to, it passed this proposition so that we could, fund all of these programs. But it's like, wait a minute, like, it's not adding up, right? And I hope you guys get what I'm saying here. It's like, how are we balancing our budget, and what things are we investing in for our community that are truly going to enrich and enhance the quality of life for people? So I'm going to keep going. John.
Yeah, okay, so
I'm so passionate. I'm just a passionate person.
Yeah, so I wanted to touch on, and we're going to go a little bit over our usual hour, just a little bit. This is going to be the last proposition that we talk on tonight, and then next week we're going to talk on more of the propositions. And so if you have any questions on specific propositions, you want to go deep on any of them, or you just want to hear a quick explanation on something, let us know. But we wanted to talk a little bit about Proposition 22. which is we talked about a little earlier. Some companies are spending upwards of $200 million in this election advertising to try and convince people to vote yes on this. That right there should always make everyone pause of why a company would be spending that much money to try and get a law passed. And really, this one is in response to a court case and then legislative action related to independent contractors in California. And so it all started many years ago when a trucking company figured out that to avoid the labor laws in California, they could just pretend that each of their drivers was its own little company instead of their employee. And then they wouldn't have to give them breaks. They wouldn't have to give them minimum wage. They could convince them to lease their truck or buy their truck and lease it to the company. They could basically take all of their expenses from running this trucking company and this shipping business and shift it on down to the employees. And so they were very successful with that for many years, doing that until it got to the California Supreme Court. After those very employees had sued for what they were owed, the California Supreme Court agreed with those employees and said this was wrong. These are not independent contractors. These are not little companies. These are your employees. And that Supreme Court case changed the landscape across California. All these other businesses that were treating their employees that way, the loophole closed on them, including famously our app-based Uber drivers and taxi drivers, or not taxi drivers, Uber drivers, Lyft drivers, food delivery people, this app-based economy. And so then we had something called AB5, which was the legislature's response to this court case. Assembly Bill 5, I believe Assemblymember Gonzalez out of San Diego authored it. It took that ruling from the Supreme Court and then put in exceptions. And so all the industry came in and they lobbied the Democratic Party to please give us an exception. You're like, if we have to comply with this ruling, we'll be put out of business. Please save us. And so a lot of companies got that exception. One group of companies that did not get the exception in the law are these app-based rideshare and delivery services. And so that's what Prop 22 is they want their exception, that they couldn't convince the legislature to give it to them, and now they're trying to convince the voters. And so in general, what it means is that they want to be able to treat their drivers like those drivers are their own business, that they're just kind of transacting with. That when you order an Uber driver, you're just asking Uber to hook you up with some other business that they know, and that guy will come and drive you, and you just are paying Uber a fee for that connection. They don't actually hire any drivers. And it's all kind of an illusion. And so the law is very clear on this currently that no, those are your employees. And this will set, Prop 22 will make it so that they can go back to treating them like independent contractors.
And one thing I wanted to add here is that, again, when you watch the news, right, or you talk to friends, there's this misconception that if this legislation does not pass, right, you might hear, well, they're going to withdraw out of California and we're not going to have, Uber and Lyft drivers, and that's just false. Actually, when you look at like the competition, right, and like monopolies, right, if that happens, and again, I'm not telling anyone how to vote, it just makes room for someone else to enter the market. And the other thing that I want to talk about and I want to emphasize is that a lot of these companies, right, they are lying, I'm just going to say it. And an independent contractor truly means that you have control of yourself and your hours, and there's a complete level of autonomy. And that is not what is happening by these with these app-based drivers, they don't have the control. And so it's just a way for people to kind of escape the regulations and the fairness of requirements on how to fairly and equitably treat your employees. So again, I just want to kind of, because when I first started learning about things, I thought about that, like, oh my gosh, well, if this doesn't happen, these effects, but it's that mindset that kind of actually prevents us from growing, right, and having more equitable wealth and truly independence. So I'm going to stop there because John did a great job.
Well, and I want to say, I've heard a lot of things over the last year and a half about this change for the independent contractors, for truckers, delivery drivers, and Uber drivers across the board. This was a big change. A lot of them are afraid of losing flexibility, kind of thing. So, like the rideshare companies have literally lied to everyone they can talk to, all of their employees. They just send them these just straight lies about things like being an employee means that we can't give you flexibility anymore. And I wanted to assure everybody that there is no law that says that if you're an employer, you have to dictate what your employee is doing, what hours they're working. Like, employers can give their employees flexibility. They can give them all of the flexibility that you would expect in these independent contractor situations. Basically, the reason why we say that these people are employees of Uber is because they're employees of Uber. It doesn't mean that they have to change how they treat them, except for that they have to make sure that they have minimum wage. They have to make sure that they're allowed to have meal breaks. That doesn't mean that they have to take their meal break. A lot of organizations that you work for, you can get that union contract that says we skip the meal break. And so a lot of what's talked about with this flexibility, I just want to assure everybody that that's not how the law works. Is that right now your employer can give you flexibility, and in fact, if you're organized and you're in a union and you're negotiating for things, you can negotiate for all kinds of flexibility.
And one thing I wanted to kind of just add is let's talk about, like, we said a lot during this conversation. They lie. But I want to talk about, like, the emotional toll that happens when you are someone that you're already, like, working a full-time job, right? And you're needing to take on this second job to survive, because the ecosystem and the system is not set up for you to succeed, right? And so that's how people are manipulated, right? Because they have their head, just trying to stay above water, right? Just trying to survive, right? And no one is out here actively trying to explain to them what their rights are, how that they can improve, how they can fight back, right? Because you have all of this money being invested in to protect a certain class of people. So no one is looking out for the little guy at the low end of the pole. And that's how you continuously have people being lied to. And when you really think about it, it is so sad and it's so despicable, because they're just trying to protect their interests. It's corporate greed, that is not concerned about the livelihood of, okay, so Mickey has a question. Yes, in 1 minute, Mickey. So it's just, anyway, I'm gonna stop because I know we're over already, and then Mickey actually has a question. So she says, and I'm going to hand this to John because I think, he does a better job sometimes of explaining this. Just, can you talk a little bit more about AB5, how AB5 connects to Prop 22?
Okay, so again, right before AB5 passed, the state of the law was that pretty much all these people who had been calling their employees independent contractors, they lost that. And now they're employees, and you gotta pay them minimum wage. They can form unions, all of these list of things. But there's industries like the rideshare industry where their whole business model is based around we're not going to pay those prices for workers, and that also includes like another one would be newspapers that hire temp workers or hire freelance journalists, so that they can pay them less and not pay benefits and kind of shuffle them around. And so all these industries, they wanted an exception to this. They pleaded like, hey, we will all go bankrupt. And when you look at news, you go, they would go bankrupt. Like they're already going bankrupt. They're already having a hard time. This would like end all the newspapers. And so they got passed into law in AB 5, a carve out. So basically AB 5 says, oh, well, if you're a freelance journalist and you're only doing this much work for them, then you're still just an independent contractor. And who got left out of AB 5 are the rideshare companies, and several other industries like truckers. They got left out of AB 5. And so Prop 22 is the rideshare companies trying to get their exception, just like the other companies, just like the newspapers did in AB 5. They want to be carved out so that they can continue to treat their employees like independent contractors. And so that's kind of the relationship between Prop 22 and AB 5, is that it's them wanting the same thing that those other industries got.
And so another example of like the misclassification that happens with independent contractors is flex drivers. So Amazon has this market of flex drivers, but if you understand how the system works, they have an app, right, with predetermined shifts that someone can select and says, okay, you can work this block from 10 to 12. You're going to get this particular rate no matter how long it takes you to complete the route, right? We're not going to pay you for, like having to deliver extra boxes, right? So when unemployment happened, and this is just kind of from an HR perspective, just a little tidbit. So when unemployment happened and the California legislator decided that they were going to extend unemployment benefits to gig workers, because that's what they're called, right? Amazon got busted because when the law changed, Amazon was still treating people like employees, right? Because the ABC test, John, is that what it's called? The ABC test says that if you don't have the opportunity to select your schedule, if they're telling you what to wear, right, then you are an employee. You're not an independent contractor, right? But Amazon was still treating people, saying and classifying them as independent contractors, but they had no control. They couldn't negotiate their salary. It was a set rate. They couldn't negotiate their hours because they were only allowed to select, a block of hours, and they were told that they had to wear a vest, right? So I'm not an independent contractor. I am an employee of Amazon that is getting taken advantage of, and they were getting away with it. So that's just kind of like another example that I kind of wanted to give you guys, because it's a really good conversation.
And one of the funny results is that the most successful companies will be doing the worst things to their employees, because, by the way, that's how they become the most successful company. In other words, Uber didn't become the company it is because they developed an app. They became the company that they did because they developed an app and they found a way to skirt labor laws. Like they cheated the market, and that's what, like Kim mentioned it before, is that if I'm not saying Uber is going to be here next year, but it's not like app-based companies will disappear. It's that Uber and Lyft, they've cornered the market by being app-based and by avoiding labor laws and cutting their costs. Yeah. So it's not that they just cheated their employees, they cheated the market, they cheated the other businesses that could be competing with them. But if anybody's following the law, you can't compete. Like your costs are too high compared to these companies. And so the most successful companies in our system you want to look closely at their business models, because what you'll probably find is where they've skirted the law to get an advantage over their competition.
Yes. So this is so I could talk about this all night, and so I kind of want to stop because I know looking at the clock we're about 15 minutes over, but I think it was I'm saying it was a really good conversation.
I think we did great. I
get to talk to John like once a week, so I always love talking to him. So I definitely, as always, there's a couple of things I just want to say really quickly. We chose these for those of you guys that are watching. I am a part of a smaller group on Facebook that we engage kind of with our audience a little bit more. So we did a poll. I created a poll to see what were the most popular propositions that people wanted to discuss. And so that is why we chose to lead with these 3 propositions, because based on the voting, not a lot of people voted, but based on the voting, these were the ones that people had the most questions on. And so John and I, which I'm going to talk about it publicly, we actually, it's very interesting. We were discussing Prop 25, and John and I, we don't agree on Prop 25. So it's very complicated, and there's a lot to it. So John and I kind of were discussing that we may, because I don't want to volunteer him yet, we may kind of just do an impromptu live like Saturday to talk about Prop 25. And so Prop 25, anyway, I don't want to talk too much, but if you guys have an interest in that, if you can let us know, because yeah, we should have a mock debate. I'm thinking, I used to get in trouble because I was a bitch in debate. So I get in trouble. Yeah, so I don't know, because I love John and I kind of go like, I just go kind of crazy.
This is the end of the partnership. We're gonna.
He's like my partner. This is like he's my partner in crime. So I cannot.
Already, I'll just agree with you.
Yeah. So we kind of wanted to put that out there. Okay, everyone's like, do it. So John and I will talk about it a little bit more. But we definitely wanted to talk about Prop 25 because we both think it's very important, and we don't agree, and that's okay.
And we agree on the underlying the get our people out of jail.
Right, yeah. But we just don't agree on the method. So I thought it would be good dialogue for us to have, like open and honest and transparent with you guys. So that's the other thing. We just wanted to put that out there, that we are interested in doing that, and we would like to do it if it's an appetite for the Prop 25. And so next week, obviously is going to be our last live, and we're going to try to get through the rest of the propositions. But as always, if you have a question, you can email us at info@voteraccess.org, right? You can email your questions, and then we're here for you. The other thing, I'm going to put it out there that John and I briefly talked about is that maybe John and I are going to continue to collaborate. He stuck with me for kind of life. But what we kind of talked about is after the election, we want to do another live, kind of like, well, what happens next? Like, and we're gonna kind of go over what passed, what didn't pass, hopefully who's president, who's not. And so we just want to ask you guys to, continue to give us feedback. Thank you guys for those of you who subscribe to the Voter Access Project YouTube channel and my YouTube channel. We are here for you. John and I also have our own personal passions, but we are really doing this work because we want to be an avenue of just truth and facts, right? So that you can feel more empowered. So, the final thing I want to say, and it was something I was supposed to say earlier, but I want to talk about this really quick because I know a lot of you guys have your ballots, and I know we're over, so it's just going to take me like 2 minutes. You guys got your ballots, right? And I just want to go back and talk about something John said, that over 30,000 ballots have been rejected, right? And so, John, I'm not going to regurgitate what John said, but I want to talk about the importance of this. If you're turning in a ballot, if you're dropping off your ballot, make sure you have your signature on your ballot, right? this is really important. And also, when they're checking the signatures, they are checking if it matches your identification card or however when you registered. So if your signature is off, right, then your ballot could possibly be rejected, right? And so this is your voice. It's your voice in an envelope. And so I just want to make sure that you guys are informing your friends to take time to use the right colored pen, to check for a signature, to make sure and to track your ballot. Because for those of you all who have already cast your ballot, there is sufficient time if there is a mistake to have it corrected. And so I'm going to stop there, and I'm just going to say, like, I know we're all busy, but I also want to challenge you guys. You're not done. Just because your ballot might be in, we still have October 19th to register, and then we have same day voter registration in California. So if you missed out, if your friends missed out and they think their vote doesn't matter, you guys now have a lot of information to tell them why their vote matters, and that they can still register up until October 19th, and they can register the same day. There are places in LOTA that they can go in and they can register. So I am challenging you guys all to talk to 2 different people and get them registered. If you can, I know we're in a global pandemic, sign up to an activity that encourages voter registration. If you're a member of a nonprofit and you can, hold a voter registration event. This is important. And for us at the local level, when we talk about John, I swear this is the last thing I'm saying. Ballots are still trickling in, and I think they have up until 30 days to count them. Our local elections, our city council and our school board can come down to a very small percentage of votes, right? So those last votes, they matter. I mean, all of the votes matter, but it could be the deciding factor in some city council races and some really important things that impact our community. So as always, thank you guys for showing up. We're here for you. We appreciate you. And we can't wait to see you next week, and probably on Saturday too.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, everybody.
Good night.